No, that's not the way it should be. Then we change it. We're the ones who change it. Who cares? I care. You should care. We should all care.
You're listening to EMPact Radio's Power Authority with Kathryn DeLong. Bold without apology and traveling at the speed of now. Kathryn DeLong, the Power Authority on EMPact Radio.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning into Power Authority on EMPact Radio this week. My name is Kathryn DeLong. Recently, we learned that India has some serious problems with its power grid after it experienced 2 major blackouts in 2 days. But India isn't alone. Pakistan, despite receiving $20.7 billion in U.S. aid between 2002 and 2011, also struggles to keep the lights on for its residents. The U.S. State Department indicates that energy is one of the top 5 priority areas for U.S. aid to Pakistan. In fact, the Obama administration has pledged another $1 billion to bolster Pakistan's power sector over the next few years. But according to World Bank data, 1/3 of the population still remains in the dark. Only 62.4% of Pakistan's population currently has access to electricity. The U.S. government has been pouring funds into Pakistan for decades, but unfortunately there is not much to show for it. In the 1960s and 70s, U.S. construction companies, backed with U.S. aid, built 2 huge dams which provided 70% of Pakistan's power supply. But Pakistan, over the years, failed to maintain those dams, and now Pakistani power stations are running at only 20 to 25% capacity. Pakistan's energy sector is saddled with debt at this point, approximately $4.4 billion. The country's energy problems stem from a history of cronyism, government corruption, lack of long-term plans, and overworking a grid that just hasn't been able to keep up with growing demand. There has been talk of cracking down on parties that pirate electricity from the grid and don't pay their utility bills, but the proposal seems unlikely as the Pakistani government commonly brushes aside the blunders of prominent companies. While the rate of population growth in Pakistan has been slowing since the 1980s, the population does continue to grow, and this isn't rocket science. Increases in population mean increases in demand for electricity. Pakistan's power sector is becoming increasingly problematic as the population rises and the government continues to kick the can down the road. Back in 2010, the New York Times published an article about Pakistan's energy crisis, and here's a quick excerpt from that article. Pakistan is in the throes of an energy crisis, with Pakistanis now enduring about 12 hours of power cuts a day, a grueling schedule that is melting ice, stopping fans, and enraging an already exhausted populace just as the blast furnace of summer gets started. So the country looked to its top bureaucrats for a solution, and instead of easing Pakistan's electricity woes, new energy-saving restrictions only made things worse. One woman quoted in that New York Times article stated that the Pakistani people are a toy in the hands of the government. And that was over 2 years ago, and since then the power sector still hasn't seen much improvement. Like the United States, Pakistan has been racking up lots of debt. In the past 3 years alone, Pakistan's total public debt has increased by 82%. Unemployment is rising, more people are falling below the poverty line, and Pakistanis aren't happy. People have taken to the streets to protest ongoing blackouts, power shortages, and general frustrations with the government. In June, thousands of protesters, angered by the government's failure to maintain the power supply, stormed the home of a Pakistani politician. This Al Jazeera news report from June describes the chaos and violence fueled by electricity failures.
These people in Lahore were so angry they set fire to offices of the electric company. Other than Punjab, towards the ruling party's offices. These sort of attacks have become common and widespread. The summer heat is bad enough, but what they're really upset about are the power blackouts. The electric company has announced up to 12 hours of power cuts in cities and towns across Pakistan. In rural areas, the outages last 20 hours. This has almost crippled normal everyday life.
Egypt has also been experiencing frequent blackouts this summer, generating criticisms of the country's new president, Mohamed Morsi. It has been almost 2 years since the Arab Spring. Protests broke out, but Egypt remains vulnerable. If the government is unable to fulfill basic utility needs, Egyptians will undoubtedly continue to rally against their new leaders. Dissatisfied activists have already launched a We Won't Pay campaign, which urges Egyptian citizens to not pay their utility bills until the blackouts come to an end. Egypt has also been experiencing rapid population growth in recent years, which has led to a spike in demand for electricity. Senator Rand Paul from Kentucky has been leading the charge trying to cut U.S. funds to Pakistan. He explained on the Senate floor that we're rewarding bad behavior with more money we don't have. Representative Gary Ackerman from New York has also spoken out against funneling money into the country, describing Pakistan as a black hole for American aid. Arguments against foreign aid to Pakistan obviously go much deeper than power outages and unimproved infrastructure. In 2009, after initially denying such accusations, former Pakistani President Musharraf admitted that U.S. aid was diverted from its intended use. Instead of fighting the Taliban and al-Qaeda with $10 billion in U.S. funds, Pakistan instead used that money to prepare for conflicts with India. In a previous podcast, I talked about how the existence of FEMA creates a moral hazard. Communities are less likely to prepare if they know that the federal government will step in and help them during emergency situations. Foreign aid also creates moral hazard. The Pakistani government knows that the U.S. will continue to hand over billions of dollars each year, even if that money is misused. For a country that is deeply in debt to funnel money into another country that is deeply in debt without many strings attached is completely nonsensical. And I'm only scratching the surface of a long history of strained U.S.-Pakistan relations, but Pakistan's failing energy sector illustrates quite well how pouring funds into the hands of an inefficient and corrupt government simply does not work.
Stay current with Kathryn DeLong's Power Authority on EMPact Radio. Contact Kathryn at radio@impactamerica.org or visit EMPactRadio.com and download podcasts. That's EMPACTRadio.com.
Have you ever used a fire extinguisher? Do you know how to provide basic first aid in the event of an emergency? Now is the time to get prepared for emergencies with free Preparedness and Community Emergency Response Team CERT training. September is National Preparedness Month, and at EMPact America, we are offering free preparedness classes to Western New York residents. No prior experience is necessary to attend the training. You can choose from 2 different sessions. Session 1 is Tuesdays and Thursdays starting September 18th at 7 p.m. at Vigilant Fire Hall, West Seneca, New York. Session 2 starts Saturday, September 15th and runs for 3 Saturday mornings until September 29th at EMPact America's offices located at Elma, New York. Training is being conducted by EMPact America, West Seneca Office of Disaster Preparedness, and the Town of Elma Office of Emergency Management. To sign up, visit www.preparehub.org/CERT or contact EMPact America at 716-435-7873.
Recharge from your day with the Power Authority with Kathryn DeLong, only on EMPactRadio.com. You can contact Kathryn at radio@impactamerica.org or visit EMPactRadio.com to download podcasts. That's EMPACTRadio.com.
Back in the United States, some Americans are also suffering the consequences of a vulnerable grid. In particular, Californians have been experiencing problems as summer temperatures rise. During the month of August, the state's electricity grid operator has issued flex alerts on multiple occasions. A flex alert is essentially a call for residents to curb their power usage in the midst of heat waves that may lead to an electricity shortage. Here's a clip that explains what to do during a flex alert.
Let's hear it for hands, a collection of nimble digits. They're as adept at turning things off as they are at switching them on, especially if we face power shortages. And state officials call a flex alert. If that happens, we all know it's time to turn off unneeded lights. Adjust the AC to 78 or higher, and don't use appliances until after 6 p.m. So here's to hands. They have the power we'll need.
State officials say that the Flex Alert campaign has been successful. California's grid is being taxed by increased demand as some of the state's nuclear and natural gas plants are offline. Texas's power grid has also been in the news. Back in May, the North American Electric Reliability Corps issued a report stating that most of North America would have enough power to meet peak air conditioning demand during the summer, but problems could arise in Texas and California. Another study released by the Electric Reliability Council of Texas found that the Texas electric grid does not have adequate reserves for future years. The report says that maintaining an adequate power supply could become particularly troublesome in 2014 if the grid is unable to keep up with rising demand. But research by the Texas Industrial Energy Consumers indicates that the price tag for preventing future blackouts could be in the billions, especially if the population continues to grow. Unlike California, which imports electricity from other states, Texas has its own grid that it must maintain. Public Utility Commissioner Ken Anderson said that reducing energy consumption statewide would have to be voluntary, and it would have to be part of consumers' choice. He says he can't imagine making it mandatory. In India, a country that experiences frequent power outages and actually suffered 2 major blackouts last month, the government permits each state to use a fixed amount of electricity, and states that overdraw from the grid are punished as the government reduces the set amount of electricity that they're allowed to use. In California, individuals who don't observe the Flex Alert won't have their power supplies cut. California's teamwork approach to curbing energy consumption is much more amiable than India's comply or be punished method, and it's probably much more effective. This past week marked 9 years since the 2003 Northeast blackout. On August 14, 2003, the eastern U.S. power grid became overloaded, and several states in the Northeast lost power. People were stranded as transportation services came to a halt. In New York, over 600 commuter trains went offline. About 30 million people were without power. Fortunately, electricity was restored for most people within 12 hours. But power outages happen all the time, even though we only usually hear about the ones that happen in major cities like D.C. But a thunderstorm was usually enough to put the power out in the neighborhood that I grew up in. Strengthening the grid is one of those issues that people don't really think about preemptively. It's more of a reactive issue. People don't push for change until something bad happens, like their power going out for 4 days. And even then, it seems like most Americans just think of power failures as a necessary evil. As the chairman of the New York Affordable Reliable Electricity Alliance said in a CBS interview, it's just not a sexy enough issue for people. I think it's safe to say that most of us are extremely dependent on electricity in our everyday lives. I live in Buffalo, and back in 2006, we had the October storm. At the time, I was living with my parents, and we didn't have a backup generator, so we were without power for about a week, and I played many, many games of Monopoly during that time. And it was a bit unnerving being without power for that long, but at the end of the day, we knew that the power would come back on eventually. We knew it would be a matter of days, not weeks or months. So an incident that caused a long-term widespread blackout, on the other hand, could definitely lead to disorder. Next month is actually National Preparedness Month, and we'll be bringing you lots of advice about what you and your family can do to prepare for emergency situations and the steps you can take to become more self-reliant.
You've been listening to The Power Authority with Kathryn DeLong, only on EMPactRadio.com. For more information about EMPact America, contact radio@EMPactAmerica.org. That's EMPACT America.org.